Alright, time to take attendance. Cableman, Caber, Potu, Phoenix Rising, Nika, Honora, Kiwi, Renee in front, Tiki Bear, should be Loritz, back, and there's Axe, Tiger, and JT, yeah, Nora, Larry, Jedi, Zizzy, Dr. Chris, and Susan. Alrighty. Tonight's story. Tonight's story is brought to you in part by dpwr.net for the Denis dates, urarchives.com for the surface history corresponding to the Denis dates, and the Cavernian calendar converter, which was written by Brett Middleton of the Fuzzy Physics Institute for converting between Denis and surface time. Tonight's story is from the book Mist, the Book of Tiana. As we've progressed through the stories of the kings, we've seen many changes in the Denis culture. We saw an austere lifestyle that began with King Rinaref, supplanted by greed and avarice that began with King Shomat. We saw a devotion to Yavo and a single faith, supplanted by diverse religions and religious beliefs numbering over 2,000, diminishing to just a handful by the end of King Kareth's reign. Because of the writings of a martyred, self-proclaimed prophet named Gish, we saw their belief system being hijacked and steered away from the words and teachings of Yavo. And with King Jaron, Kareth's grandfather, we saw how the classes became the most divided they had ever been in their history. But the more violent factions in Denis decided to follow Yavo more closely and hope for a peaceful solution for their differing point of view on the outsiders. Gish's writings resulted in a conservative culture within Denis society, a culture that held the Arotanti, or outsiders, with great disdain and contempt. This general attitude among the Denis was another contributing factor in the demise of a once great empire. We looked at the Midis War, which occurred during the early 8th millennium of Denis history. It was a war that was, once again, started by violent factions who were vehemently against contact with the Arotanti. This prejudice, though not held with the same violent emotions, still was felt by the majority of Denis society, a society that was very ethnocentric as well as xenophobic. And these feelings and opinions remained prevalent up to the fall. We learned about Agaris, the architect of the fall. His motives were neither ethnocentric nor did they stem from xenophobia. He was driven strictly by revenge. Revenge for being wrongly accused and convicted of a crime he did not commit. Revenge that drove him to commit genocide against his own people. A character flaw that would spell the end of an empire. Also, there are the beginnings of Atris, one of the heroes of the fall, the excavation of the great shaft, and of a friendship with Viovis, who would become one of the villains of the fall. We learned about a surface dweller named Anna, her life and how she came to find the cavern, and those same old Denis fears of the Arotanti and the outsiders, and their possibly corrupting influence on the Denis populace. We learned of Anna's time in prison, her learning the Dini language, and of her uncertain future, as the great lords debated what should be done with her. We learned how Anna came to live with Atreus' parents, and how Veovis, through his arrogance, assumed Anna would not come to his first book celebration. We learned how Atreus took exception to his friend's snubbing of Anna, and in turn snubbed his friend for making him choose between the two, and finally deciding to write an age with Anna. How, after living and working together, they fell in love, and how that love alienated Veovis, causing his anger to burn brighter than ever, and bring an end to his friendship with Atreus. We learned about the origins of the Watcher Sanctuary, how Guildmaster Kadish purchased a sanctuary in Durkana and built Annone in order to perpetuate the lie that he was the grower, as he fancied himself to be. We learned about the birth of Gen, and how Agarus was a master forger, known as the Philosopher. We learned how Agarus' forgeries led to the distrust between Atreus and Veovis, and the latter's becoming accused and convicted of a crime he did not commit, stripping him of all he had known. This brought great shame not only on him, but on his family as well. In fact, the shame was so great it ultimately affected his father's health, hastening an early death. In addition to this, his friend Suaner could not be found. As Veovis' trial ended, so too did his father's life come to a close. Though Atreus blamed himself for setting the great wheels of the Dini state in motion, wheels that could crush a man as easily as their great hammers pound the rock, it was actually Agarus who set this masterful, though evil, plan into motion. Last time we learned about Gen's early years, and how his relationship with his mother went from being very close, basically he was a mama's boy, to becoming distant, and his becoming more enamored of the knowledge possessed by the guilds, in turn causing him to start identifying more with his Dini heritage than his Aratanti heritage. In short, the beginnings of his pride. Tonight, we will get a taste of what Agarus has in store for Dini, as his plans for revenge begin to unfold. As Gen was finally getting accustomed to his new life as a student in a guild, a crime spree began to occur for a solid 8 weeks. Senior guildsmen were attacked by unknown assailants. Offices were burgled. 3 Cortinia blank books were missing, along with several linking books. It culminated with an explosion in the ink works, where the special ink was made for their linking books, killing many people. The sabotage was designed to conceal the fact that a sizable quantity of ink had been stolen. As if this were not bad enough, the Inkworks was the 6th guild to be attacked. The emergency council, which included Atreus, Hagir of the stonemasons, Jadaris of the maintainers, Gerald of the Guild of Caterers, who was also present during the creation of the Great Shaft, Ifjerij, and Lord Rahira. They met to discuss the goings-on. When questioned, Guildmaster Gerald posited that someone was linking throughout Dini, someone with special knowledge of the guilds, someone who knew where they were vulnerable, where to attack, and when. Lord Rahira scoffed at there being only one perpetrator due to the variety of attacks. Atreus voiced his one-word thought: Veovis? Jadaris was positive that Veovis was locked safely away in his prison age. Rhaenyra was not so sure and ordered Jadaris to check it out immediately. While Jadaris was off checking the prison age, Rhaenyra told disturbing news to the rest of the emergency council. As you may recall from an earlier story, Veovis had the age that he wrote, Adergemet, added to the Guild of Writers canon, which there were only 93 ages. Of these, 5 were considered classics. Though we do not know all of the 5 writers, we do know that the first and foremost was Rhaenyra, who wrote the book of Denis and Earth. Rhaenyra's news was that one of these 5, the book written by Talishar, had been desecrated. The book had been altered to the point where the age had become unstable, and it was feared that it would soon self-destruct. What was amazing was the fact that the changes in the text appeared to have been written by Master Talishar himself, even though the original book had been written over 6,000 years before, and the ink of the new entries was barely 3 weeks old. Aetius remembered the incriminating evidence against Veovis at his trial. Though their friendship had become strained over Anna, to the point of being broken, he had found it difficult to believe that Veovis was guilty. The desecrated book was obviously the work of a master forger. Aetius voiced his concern and suggested that Agarus be brought in for questioning, and that Veovis might have been innocent after all. A short time later, Jadaris entered Veovis's prison age, only to find it empty. In Veovis's dwelling on that age, his dinner had been left to rot. Alongside the remains of the food were 3 linking books, one of which returned to Denis. Meanwhile, seeing the explosion at the inkworks, Anna became worried for Gen's safety and wanted to comfort his fears. For the past several weeks, she had become more and more uncomfortable with the separation between her and Gen. As she was on her way to the guild hall to retrieve her son, she spotted a cloaked man that looked somewhat familiar. As he brushed past her, she recognized him as Veovis. She followed him into a mansion that was dark inside. The mansion had been abandoned for many years. There were old portraits hanging on the walls. She heard Veovis upstairs. As she was slowly climbing the stairs, she came close enough to one of the portraits to see that it was of Agarus, or one of his ancestors with a very close resemblance. It now all became clear. This had been Agarus's house before his fall, and it was now very obvious that it was he who had helped Veovis to escape. She heard Veovis in a room at the far end of the upstairs hallway. Stepping into a nearby room, she saw an open linking book on the table. She hesitated briefly, then placed her hand on the linking panel. She materialized in a mansion in a strange age. It had a purple sky and a turbulent green sea. This was not a world that would have been acceptable to the guilds. Fearing that Viovis would be coming close behind her, she quickly explored the mansion. She found a laboratory with a vicious-looking hunting-bird, and many vials of chemicals. She recognized most of them, but one she did not. It had a rather noxious odor, and she realized that it must have been a sleeping agent of sorts. She also found a storeroom. In there were linking books, dozens of them, all linking to various places in Denis, to various rooms and homes, to specific rooms in the guild hall, to the council chamber itself. Not only that, but there were other books, blank books. She counted them. There were 48 in all. She knew she had to put an end to this now. As she had thought, Viovis slinked into that place as well. Staying out of sight, she followed him. She saw Agaris and another man link into the age on an external platform, and watched as Viovis extended a walkway to the pair so they could get to the mansion and the rest of the island. It was a rather ingenious method of security. Whoever might follow them would be stranded out there, with no access to a linking book and no way off the platform. As they approached, she could hear them discussing their plans, and recognized the third man, Suanir, the maintainer who had gone missing the year before Viovis's trial. The men came inside and began to discuss their plans for Denis. While they were otherwise distracted, Anna went and moved all of the books, including the blank ones, into a room off the laboratory. While there, she also set a trap. Then she heard a splash outside. There was a cage suspended just above the brackish water. It was her beloved Atris. Unknown to her, Atris had gone searching for her, and when he ran into Viovis, who claimed to have captured her already and would kill her if he did not follow him, and then Viovis slinked away, and, fearing for Anna's life, Atris had followed Viovis, and was immediately captured. Please join us next time as we learn of a husband's rescue and a plan for revolt. The end. Welcome, Caver. You're welcome, Dr. Chris. Yeah, he is, Pochu. Welcome, Cave Woman, and Honora, and Kiwi. Thanks, Pochu. Thanks, Tiki. I know it wasn't anything you said, Lords. You're good. And thank you all for coming tonight. You're welcome, Max. And time to end the video right now.